Hello everybody. In this lecture we're going to talk briefly about idealism. This should be a fairly short lecture. If you recall, there are two major classifications of metaphysical theories about the basic kinds of stuff that make up the universe. There's dualism, of which there are various kinds. Dualist theories hold that there are two basic kinds of stuff in the universe, physical substance and mental substance. We discussed Descartes' interactive dualism at length. This is the view that there are two basic kinds of substances and that they can interact with or influence one another. Then there are monist theories. These theories say that there's only one basic kind of substance in the universe. Among these theories are the theories of physicalism, sometimes called materialism, and idealism. Physicalism says that there is only one basic kind of substance in the universe and that this is physical. This is the view that most modern scientists hold. Idealism is the view that there is only one basic kind of substance in the universe and that it is immaterial, usually mental. One major historical proponent of idealism was George Berkeley, who lived in the middle of the 18th century. So, why would anybody hold that the physical world doesn't exist in a serious way? Descartes considered this, but he only did so as part of a thought experiment in which he began with radical doubt and worked his way back up to the material world. Well, to see why, think back upon the primary and secondary qualities that Locke discussed. Primary qualities were qualities like shape, motion, and number. These, Locke said, really existed as part of and resembled the objects that they were associated with. Secondary qualities are qualities that exist only in the mind. Examples of these are smell and sound and taste. They are produced by the primary qualities of objects, but they do not resemble these properties. For example, the wavelength of red light isn't really red, but it causes us to perceive red. So we said that these exist only in the mind and do not truly resemble the objects that they are associated with. What Berkeley suggested is that whether for primary or secondary qualities, we only have access to our senses. He essentially argues that primary qualities are really no different from secondary qualities and that we also only know primary qualities through our senses and the representations that they produce in our minds in the same way as secondary qualities. In other words, all of our interaction with primary qualities is in the mind as well. We cannot say that they really resemble the objects or that those objects even really exist. Our minds never get at them, so to speak. So when it comes to objects, we never know anything about them except what our minds construct. He essentially says that the material world isn't doing any extra work, and he cuts it out with Occam's razor type reasoning. Occam's razor is a principle of reason that states that we should not multiply entities beyond necessity. In other words, every part of our theory should be required. This can also be looked at as not multiplying assumptions beyond necessity. Of course, when we think about physical substance, it is doing some work for our theory. The physical world is what holds our senses constant for ourselves, and it explains why items appear similar to other people. It explains why we can be surprised by discoveries and ideas we would never have suspected, and why things might not always be where we thought they were, and why the world doesn't change just because we stop perceiving it, and other facts such as these. Berkeley, however, suggested that things only exist as perception. How then can we ever notice something new, and why does the world change or disappear when we do not perceive it? He reasoned that the universe, including ourselves, must exist only because they are in the minds of an even greater being, God. There are a few criticisms of this. For one thing, one of his proofs of God, which is what allows for constancy of the apparent external world, is circular. He understands the fact that the world remains fairly constant and that we can have sensations impressed upon us unexpectedly, and to explain this he uses God. He then uses God as a way to explain his theory, making his argument circular. We know God exists under this view because God must exist to maintain the universe, and we only have an explanation of how the universe can be maintained as pure ideas by assuming that God exists. His proof of idealism is a bit circular as well. His arguments claim that what appear to be objects are nothing but perception, and then uses this to argue for idealism, which is the view that objects are just perception. Another problem is that he is arguably not proposing a legitimate cut with Occam's razor. He substitutes God for material substance, and the argument is that all we are ever acquainted with is mind, and so that this is a simpler solution. But we are not acquainted with minds holding other minds in existence, and the word God assumes many other specific properties beyond just conscious awareness of the universe. Another interesting consequence is that it seems difficult to reconcile free will if we are just ideas in God's mind. After all, isn't God responsible for his own ideas? Of course, the incompatibility of a theory with free will does not disprove the theory. After all, free will might not exist. Many physicalists do not believe in free will, but we will talk about free will later in the course. In modern philosophy, pure metaphysical idealism is seldom held anymore, especially in this extreme form. Nevertheless, idealism fills an important conceptual void between dualism and physicalism and provides both physicalists and dualists with important philosophical challenges to overcome. And that about wraps it up for this lecture. Until next time.